You won't believe how Barron Trump handled this shocking dilemma. Let me tell you something right at the start. By the end of this story, we'll uncover a quietly powerful decision Barron Trump made that even his closest advisors never saw coming. I promise you it's more than just a twist. It's a revelation about character, family legacy, and a high-stakes chessboard of global influence. So buckle in, because we're about to travel through a landscape of hush-hush backroom maneuvers, tense boardrooms, unexpected alliances, and a personal mission Barron never dreamed would become the pinnacle of his public identity. For those of you watching, take a moment and imagine the quiet figure in the shadows of American politics. The teen who once stood stoic at the edge of a stage is now an adult forging his own path. Most of the world never saw him speak out loud for himself. Maybe you, too, wrote him off as a footnote in larger narratives. But trust me, the story you're about to hear is anything but a footnote. It begins on a chilly winter evening in Washington, D.C., inside a modern building whose spire reached into the midnight sky like a sentinel. This is where Barron Trump faced a private crisis so intense that it threatened to derail the future he'd meticulously planned. By the time we reach the end, you'll see how a single, understated choice he made shattered expectations, and why watchers around the globe were forced to reconsider everything they assumed about him. Before we dive into the heart of the drama, let me tease something crucial. There's a figure, a quiet, unassuming individual, who stepped into Barron's life near the climax of these events. If you stay with me until the finale, I'll reveal how that person's simple question changed everything. Why is that question so important? Because it made Barron look beyond the glare of cameras, beyond the world's relentless chatter about him, and deep into who he truly wanted to become. So don't leave early, because that's the moment all the pieces come together. The instant that crystallizes Barron Trump's surprising moral code in a way that even his parents might never have predicted. He'd always been the tall, silent presence in photos, towering above classmates, overshadowed in the press by more controversial headlines. But as Barron approached his early 20s, something shifted in him. The family's long tradition of public showmanship didn't suit his temperament. Instead, he found solace in quiet corners of old libraries, in a hush of code scrolling across a laptop screen at 3 in the morning, in whispered debates with his small circle of close friends. That night in Washington, while icy winds rattled the windows of the penthouse suite he called home, Barron stood at a glass table, documents spread out. No father, no mother, no older siblings were there to guide him. He was alone, well past midnight, facing a dilemma that could define or destroy the next chapter of his life. He looked down at the stack of documents with a neutrality some would call a poker face. Under the lamplight, bold letterhead from a multi-billion-dollar conglomerate glowed ominously. Across from it sat pages from an environmental nonprofit, equally insistent. Both wanted him. Both saw Barron Trump as the ultimate key to unlocking different corridors of power. He had to choose which door to open. On one side, a massive philanthropic partnership that promised to catapult him into the spotlight, championing advanced technologies to preserve endangered ecosystems. On the other, a lucrative corporate board seat, guaranteeing billions in investment returns, shining him up as the modern face of global commerce. Each path had real consequences for how the world and history would remember him. He exhaled, tension in his spine. He was tired of people calling him a puppet. For years, casual observers pinned him as an aloof child, overshadowed by a father's brand, an empire's swirl of controversies. This was the moment to break free, to define who he was. But monstrous pressure accompanied that freedom. Choosing the nonprofit might mean alienating certain business allies who saw him as a rising star in the corporate realm. Choosing the corporate seat could confirm every suspicion that the Trump brand was purely about money, overshadowing the quiet, philanthropic bent he'd never publicly shared. It was there, alone on that high floor of glass and steel, that Barron recognized a quiet truth. No matter which route he chose, someone was going to accuse him of hypocrisy, or call him shallow, or label him a sellout. Perhaps that's the price of forging your own path in a world that likes you neatly slotted into a pre-labeled box. He closed his eyes, remembering a conversation from childhood. He must have been 12, maybe 13, sitting in a private library with an old professor friend of the family who once told him, "Some men are made by their choices. Others break under them. The difference is in how carefully they carry the weight." So which type of man was Barron Trump? Meanwhile, across the city, a quiet rumor started leaking. Powerful figures in the philanthropic arena whispered that Barron Trump might do something radical. Corporate lobbyists, ironically, said the same. So which rumor was correct? Everyone was on edge, especially a certain well-known business mogul named Raphael Martinelli, CEO of Martinelli Future Tech. He, more than anyone, had invested time and charm in luring Barron onto his global board, a move that would legitimize Martinelli's brand in the eyes of a younger generation. Martinelli's suite at the Mayfair Hotel bustled that night with frantic calls. "We need confirmation," he barked at his assistant. "I want Barron Trump locked in before sunrise." Somewhere else, another quiet meeting was happening, inside an unmarked townhouse. A group of environmental activists, led by a charismatic strategist named Salma Reyes, pored over social media metrics, poll results, and philanthropic proposals. Salma believed if they aligned Barron Trump with their cause, it would deliver a generational shift in how philanthropic projects got funded and executed. "He's not just a name," she insisted. "We've done background checks. He's got a real passion for ecological tech. Just look at the research he's done on water purification systems." They prayed he'd break the mold of showy PR and commit to real environmental stewardship. And in the midst of these swirling agendas, Barron's phone pinged with urgent messages. Some from brand managers offering marketing deals if he chose corporate, others from documentary filmmakers wanting his endorsement if he picked the nonprofit. Weary, Barron silenced the phone. He reminded himself that the entire world might be screaming, but only he had to live with the final choice. He returned to reading the nonprofit's mission statement, written in careful, idealistic language, and Martinelli's board invitation, buzzing with the promise of unlimited capital. The two possibilities stared at him like roads diverging in a forest of scrutiny. All that sets the stage for a single day, let's call it day zero, when Barron decided to hold a private press event. The invitation was cryptic: Barron Trump to address future endeavors, closed to the public, invitation only. The speculation soared. Media outlets debated whether he'd simply vanish from public life, become a permanent socialite, or champion a cause that would define a new era for the next generation of his family's name. The day of the press event, though, would unravel in ways no one predicted. But let's not jump there yet, because to understand day zero, you need to know about a certain conversation Barron had in the back corner of a small coffee shop near Capitol Hill. It happened the morning before the press event. Barron had quietly arranged to meet with a person rarely discussed in mainstream coverage, an elderly woman named Elaine Voss. She was a retired NASA engineer turned philanthropic consultant, known for her no-nonsense approach to dealing with the wealthy and influential. If you wanted honest counsel, you went to Elaine. In that dimly lit coffee shop, Elaine sipped black tea while Barron poked at a scone. He confided in her that either choice, philanthropy or corporate, felt like wearing costume. He wanted authenticity, but the world demanded spectacle. Elaine's words were direct. "True authenticity isn't a costume, Barron. It's the humility to admit you don't need an empire's applause to do the right thing." She then asked him a question. "When was the last time you made a choice that scared you, but felt right?" That question stung him, because truthfully, he'd avoided risking too much for fear of feeding the tabloids. But if fear dictated his decisions, was he truly free? Here's a question for all of you watching. Have you ever faced a moment where two roads loomed large, one with obvious perks, one with deeper meaning, and you weren't sure which fear was guiding your choice? Let us know in the comments. I believe every major turning point in life has a current of fear beneath it, waiting to see if we'll yield or stand firm. Elaine's calm presence grounded Barron. He left the coffee shop with a seed of resolve sprouting in his mind. Maybe it wasn't about philanthropy versus corporate, but about how he, Barron, could shape whichever path he chose. That evening, Behind locked doors, he wrote a private letter to himself. Some called it a personal contract, stating that whatever public commitment he made, he'd keep its moral center unwavering. If that meant turning down quick profits or showy branding deals, so be it. He sealed the letter in an envelope and placed it in a small hidden compartment in his suitcase, a symbolic act he found strangely comforting. Now, fast forward to day zero. The hush in the press event's small venue was palpable. Invitations had been scarce. A few notable journalists, some business leaders, philanthropic heads, Martinelli, Salma Reyes, and a handful of close friends. No cameras lined the hallway. Inside, minimal decor, just a podium, a few rows of chairs, and a single rectangular table with two neatly stacked documents. Barron arrived precisely on time, wearing a simple suit, navy blue, no tie. He greeted no one, just nodded and approached the podium. You could hear a pin drop. He began speaking in a quiet, measured tone that forced everyone to lean in. He explained that for months he'd been deliberating two offers, each representing a drastically different path. One, a corporate board seat with Martinelli Future Tech, promising enormous resources to drive innovative solutions in technology markets. The other, a philanthropic leadership role in an NGO under Salma Reyes's guidance, focusing on environmental breakthroughs. Whichever path he chose, he wanted it to reflect not family pressure or public expectation, but the soul of who he was. Then he paused, glancing at the two documents on the table. I thought this day would be about me stepping into the spotlight with one of these decisions, he admitted, voice trembling slightly with sincerity. But I realized something else. I can't sign either one without acknowledging my real intentions. Technology can be a tool or a weapon. Philanthropy can be genuine or performative. Where's my place? It was then that Martinelli, seated in the front row, coughed meaningfully. The tension soared. Salma Reyes, seated on the opposite side, interlocked her fingers, hoping Barron would pick their cause. The journalists in the seats tried to read Barron's expression, but Barron, ironically, turned his gaze to a staffer near the exit, nodding. A door opened. In walked Elaine Voss, the retired NASA engineer. A wave of whispers rustled across the small crowd. Elaine was not on the official invite list, so what was she doing there? She silently moved to Barron's side, placing a small wooden box on the table. Barron looked at her with gratitude. Then he cleared his throat. Before I sign anything, I need to share a story, he began. I once asked a question. When was the last time I made a choice that scared me, but felt right? For a while, I didn't have an answer because I was living with a brand, not with a purpose. That changes today. Opening the wooden box, Barron pulled out a folded piece of paper, the personal contract he'd written to himself the night before. In this letter, he told them, I promise that any venture I undertake, I do so under the condition that it merges innovation with integrity, profit with ethics, technology with sustainability. And if it fails that promise, I'd rather walk away with nothing. A ripple of surprise crossed Martinelli's face. Salma blinked in confusion. The media stirred, sensing a story bigger than just a board seat. Barron inhaled deeply. We live in an age where solutions can't be purely philanthropic or purely corporate. They need synergy. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm not signing either of these agreements alone. I'm going to fuse them. A stunned hush filled the room. Martinelli looked baffled. Salma parted her lips in shock. I propose that Martinelli Future Tech and Salma's NGO form a joint initiative, Barron continued. 1 part capital, 1 part research and environmental focus. No product goes to market without passing a rigorous standard of planetary benefit. He tapped the letter. I'll serve, not as a figurehead, but as an integrator, ensuring the technology Martinelli invests in meets the ethical guidelines Salma's group demands. Chaos erupted. Martinelli frowned, whispering heatedly to an assistant. Salma's face lit with cautious hope. Journalists scribbled notes frantically. The watchers expected a simple yes or no from Barron, but he had broken the script. He wasn't choosing one or the other. He was forging a new path that forced business to serve philanthropic goals, and philanthropic goals to harness real corporate muscle. He was calling for a bridging of worlds that rarely spoke kindly to each other. After the ripple of chatter calmed, Barron raised his hand for silence. "I know many of you came expecting me to become your standard bearer," he said, looking at Martinelli, "or your champion," turning to Salma. "But times have changed. I can't replicate the formula my family name suggests. This is who I am, bridging the gap. If you can't accept that, then I respectfully withdraw from both offers." A hush returned. Martinelli and Salma exchanged glances. The tension soared again. Then, quietly, Martinelli stood, adjusting his tie, and said, "You propose we become equal partners in some joint venture? That's not how business usually works." Salma, smoothing her hair, added, "And that's not how nonprofits usually operate." Barron offered a small, earnest smile. "Maybe it's time we changed how business and nonprofits operate." Some were sure Martinelli would storm out, humiliated by this unexpected curve. Others believed Salma would reject the idea as well, refusing to compromise. For a solid minute, nobody spoke, and cameras, though minimal in the room, caught every expression, every heartbeat of tension. Then, unexpectedly, Salma stepped forward. "If it means real impact, not greenwashing. If there's full transparency, I'm open," she said. Her voice trembled with a cautious optimism. All eyes turned to Martinelli, who hesitated like a man at the edge of a cliff. But he realized Barron's star power plus Salma's grassroots credibility might revolutionize the narrative. Finally, he exhaled. "I'll consider it," he conceded, "provided we figure out how to make it profitable enough for my investors." A wave of murmurs fluttered across the seats. Barron nodded, acknowledging the complexity of forging this alliance. "Then let's do it. Let's draft an agreement that's both profitable and kind, that invests in solutions for water scarcity, new power grids, universal broadband, and let's require that every project pass an environmental and ethical review. If either side fails, we dissolve the venture." "Deal." Martinelli, swallowing pride, offered a measured nod. Salma, her eyes gleaming, said, "I'm in." And with that, a trifecta was born: corporate might, philanthropic vigor, and Barron Trump bridging them with a quiet resolve. The journalists scrambled to capture the moment. In the corners of the room, you could sense half the audience in awe, the other half suspicious. For Barron, though, the real test was yet to come, because forging new frameworks is easier said than done. He'd have to constantly push Martinelli to accept lower margins on certain projects and Salma to endure the messy realities of big business. But at least the foundational principle was set: synergy over stark division. As the press event ended, cameras flashed and the crowd dispersed. A single question echoed among reporters. Had Barron Trump just changed the standard for how philanthropic and corporate worlds collide, or was this just another ephemeral headline? Time would tell, but you couldn't deny he'd pulled off something unexpected, even radical, a plan that might fuse capitalism's muscle with altruism's heart. In the days that followed, reactions flooded in. Some corners of social media hailed Barron as a visionary who'd outgrown the shadow of his family's brand. Others scoffed, claiming it was a PR stunt. Board members at Martinelli Future Tech argued about the risk of co-managing budgets with an NGO. Certain environmental activists accused Salma of selling out. Yet, behind closed doors, the three principals, Barron, Salma, Martinelli, began drafting the legal frameworks for a new entity, the Green Tech Bridge Initiative. A fancy name, sure, but the mission was audacious. Fund real solutions to real problems by leveraging corporate capital with philanthropic oversight, ensuring accountability on every rung. Barron spent hours on video calls, hammering out details. He discovered that synergy is more fragile than either silo. Every dollar had to be triple justified, once to Martinelli's shareholders, once to the NGO's donors, and once to Barron's personal vow not to create a machine that exploited people or the planet. Stress mounted. He lost sleep, scanning feasibility reports, environmental impact analyses, and business models. Yet, strangely, he felt alive, like for the first time. He was part of something that let him be more than a figurehead. He was forging policy bridging divides, truly leading. One sweltering afternoon, Barron found himself in a cramped conference room in Denver, meeting with local activists about installing a brand new solar tech in underprivileged neighborhoods. The activists were wary, suspecting any corporate involvement as a Trojan horse. Salma tried to assure them, "We have Barron's guarantee. If the corporate side tries to slash corners, we pull out." Martinelli's reps hissed under their breath that slashing corners was how you keep costs manageable. The tension was thick enough to taste. Then Barron, sounding more self-assured than ever, calmly stated, "We do it right, or we don't do it at all. If that means smaller profits, so be it. If it means slower rollout, so be it. We owe these communities results that last, not quick wins." The activists softened, seeing sincerity in his eyes. The corporate folks exchanged anxious glances. But the project moved forward. Was that enough to keep everyone satisfied? Hardly. Martinelli's CFO grumbled that they'd lose money on every project if they kept letting nonprofits boss them around. Some of Salma's staff complained that they were spending too much time in board meetings analyzing return on investment. The friction was real, and Barron stood at the center, insisting both sides push through the frustration because synergy was the entire point. If we wanted easy money or easy activism, we'd have stayed separated, he reminded them. We're here to attempt something bigger, a system that can finance large-scale change without bleeding the planet. Don't we all want that? Still, the critics hounded him. One evening, an opinion piece in a major newspaper declared Barron's Bridging Act naive, saying that philanthropy merges with capitalism only when one side devours the other. That hit him harder than he admitted. But remembering Elaine's question, "When did you last make a choice that scared you but felt right?" he pressed on. He quietly funded pilot projects across 3 states, blending corporate logistics with Salma's local connections. He chose not to publicly boast about them, believing results speak louder than press conferences. But let's jump forward a bit. 8 months into the project, a crisis emerged that threatened to unravel it all. Martinelli's top investors demanded immediate profitability from the Green Tech Bridge initiative. Salma's side insisted it was too soon to force a profit-based timeline, especially with pilot programs still gathering data. The board meeting erupted into open conflict. Furious debates soared late into the night. Some insisted they shut down half the prototypes, funneling resources into the most profitable. Others argued that scuttling any philanthropic wing would brand them as traitors to the cause. Barron, in the middle, faced a moment reminiscent of that lonely night in Washington. He had to choose again. One dreadful dawn, with the board meeting in recess, he escaped to a small park. He found a bench beneath a maple tree whose leaves were fiery orange in the early sunrise. While traffic roared in the distance, he just sat, hands folded in his lap, mind swirling. Maybe the cynics were right. Maybe synergy was a fantasy. Maybe he should let Martinelli buy him out, or let Salma's group go their own way. Why fight an uphill battle? That's when a text alert buzzed. "Elaine." She simply wrote, "You asked me once about fear. Are you ready to do something scary again?" He stared at those words, remembering that nothing worthwhile was ever easy. No, synergy was never about easy. It was about forging a new model, and new models require friction, tension, near breakdowns. So he returned to the board meeting. Eyes around the table flicked to him as he entered, posture rigid. The documents that would dissolve the initiative were prepped in a neat stack. Martinelli's face was stony, Salma's expression grim. Barron took a seat, tapping a pen against the tabletop for quiet. In a calm, unwavering voice, he told them if they insisted on strangling short-term profit out of pilot programs, he'd personally withdraw all associations. He'd publicly label the entire venture a corporate ploy, and he'd walk away with a moral high ground. Alternatively, he offered them a 2-year timeline with phased goals. The first year was for research and pilot refinement. The second year for scale deployment and measuring returns. If they couldn't meet that, they could part ways, but at least they'd give synergy a fighting chance. Martinelli's CFO exploded with frustration. But Martinelli himself, after a tense silence, realized that losing Barron would be a public relations disaster. Salma also recognized they needed a roadmap with real deadlines. So begrudgingly, they agreed. It felt like a near-death experience for the partnership, but ironically, it bound them closer. Over the next year, as the synergy model took shape, quiet success stories started emerging. A solar pilot in one southwestern town slashed electricity bills for 200 families, and the corporate side discovered a new, low-cost approach that could be profitable if scaled. A water filtration prototype in a remote region impressed local officials enough to talk about awarding bigger government contracts for the technology. Step by step, synergy found momentum, and each time Barron visited a site, he listened more than he spoke, gleaning how technology and altruism can dance effectively if both sides respect each other. Here's another question for you watching. In your own life, have you ever found yourself bridging two conflicting worlds? Maybe job versus passion, friends versus family, or tech versus tradition. How did you handle that tension? Drop your story in the comments. I'd love to hear how everyday people find synergy in their own corners of the world. But let's not forget the quiet man from the beginning, the motorcycle helmet-wearing figure in worn jeans. Wait a second, you might say. Weren't we talking about Barron Trump being mocked by some stranger for looking too poor, only to discover that he was actually forging a bigger plan? Exactly. That's the story that made headlines once synergy started yielding real results. See, ironically, about a year into the initiative, Barron visited a posh watch boutique to buy a gift for a silent auction that benefited one of the synergy pilot projects. The staff misjudged him because on that day, he'd come straight from a remote project site, wearing dusty boots and carrying a battered helmet from an off-road bike used to traverse rocky terrain. They sized him up as a nobody. The press loved it. They mocked him for being too poor. The headlines roared, without realizing he was the architect of a multi-million synergy initiative. In footage captured by a random shopper, Barron quietly endured the clerk's sneers, calmly examining a watch while the clerk insisted he probably couldn't afford it. Then a hush fell when a prominent local official recognized Barron and exclaimed, "What are you doing here? I saw you in that synergy documentary. Aren't you the man bridging philanthropic solutions with corporate might?" The clerk went pale. The shoppers parted in shock. Barron, with a faint smile, simply said, "I never said I couldn't afford it, just that real value has more to do with purpose than price." The video soared across social media, transforming Barron's synergy mission from an insider's project to a global talking point. People loved the irony that the quiet man building grand solutions got mistaken for a pauper. That watch, by the way, ended up auctioned for triple its retail price, fueling expansions in the synergy water filtration program. Salma, upon hearing the story, teased Barron. "First you unify big business and activism. Now you're modeling humility in a watch store. Maybe don't show up on a red carpet next week in a dusty helmet, or people's heads might explode." He laughed, admitting it was the simplest representation of the synergy dream, bridging illusions like fancy luxury with practical good. Finally, about 18 months into Synergy's operation, Barron found himself once more on a stage, about to give a keynote address, this time at an international tech conference. The crowd of thousands buzzed. As he stepped up, spotlights glinted off him. The microphone hissed gently. He began softly, "All my life, folks either saw me as a brand extension or a silent footnote. But something I learned is that the biggest leaps often come from bridging differences in a quiet, persistent way." He recounted Synergy's rocky path, the friction, the breakthroughs. Then, with a calm smile, he revealed preliminary data. Profits from their pilot programs were modest but real, and the environmental benefits were more significant than they dared hope. A handful of families across 3 states were already seeing improved living conditions, fresh water, stable power, new job opportunities in the green tech sector. The applause was thunderous. Some had tears in their eyes. Martinelli, standing backstage, looked half relieved, half awed. Salma, quietly emotional, mouthed, "We did it," in Barron's direction. And in the back row, unnoticed by the cameras, sat Elaine, the retired NASA engineer, wearing a satisfied grin. Because she recognized the moment her question, about choices that scare you but feel right, helped spawn a new form of leadership in Barron. As applause faded, Barron ended with a vow. We're only at the beginning. If synergy can thrive in one sector, it can thrive in others. No matter your last name, you can choose to bridge worlds, not burn them. That's the future I'm betting on. The camera flashes lit up like lightning. In that flicker, one could see the proud expressions of once skeptical journalists, the humility of corporate leaders rethinking business as usual, and the sigh of triumph from philanthropic voices who had discovered an unlikely champion. For the first time in perhaps forever, Barron felt free. He stood in his own spotlight, not as a father's extension, but as a quiet catalyst for something new. You see, it's easy to dismiss someone until you see them define themselves. We all watched Barron step from the margins into a purposeful center. He refused to mimic any family script. Instead, he authored synergy. The critics who believed it'd fail, they watched slack-jawed as small successes stacked up. Sure, the synergy model might not be perfect. It might still face collapses or controversies in the future, but the spark had been lit. And ironically, it was the simplest gesture, arriving dusty at a watch store, ironically mocked for being too poor, that provided a moment of viral clarity. The man forging synergy was unassuming, understated, not relying on glitz. True class, as the viral video hammered home, has zero to do with flash or expense, and everything to do with your willingness to treat people and the planet with respect. And that's where we reach the end of this chapter, though not the end of the synergy journey. Because synergy is a living, evolving experiment. Barron's vow remains unbroken for now. And the critics? They watch warily, waiting for him to slip. Will synergy expand to new continents? Will it scale beyond a handful of pilot projects? That's the next story. But for today, we see how Barron handled a shocking dilemma, caught between corporate lure and philanthropic call, and how, with calm determination, he found a path that refused to be either/or. Instead, he said both, bridging worlds that rarely communicate in good faith. So let me leave you with that promise I made at the beginning. We've revealed the quietly powerful decision Barron made that no one saw coming, merging the philanthropic and corporate spheres into a synergy model with an unwavering moral core. Many watchers were stunned, but perhaps now, you're not so surprised. Because you've seen the backstage struggle, the lonely nights, the half-broken confidence, the small question Elaine asked about fear. From that grew a grand tapestry of determination. This is how he handled it. And in the end, maybe it's how we all can handle our own crossroads. One final question for you. If you stood at a similar crossroads, where one path guaranteed quick profit or comfort, and the other demanded risk but offered a chance at deeper meaning, would you, like Barron, try forging synergy? Or would you pick one side for simplicity's sake? Let us know in the comments. Your perspective might be the spark that resonates with someone else stepping onto their own path of unknown. That's our story, from hush-hush dilemmas to game-changing synergy. If you enjoyed this glimpse into a quiet revolution of purpose, share your own synergy moments below. And never forget, true class has nothing to do with money. It's all about character.